My name is Mark Curry. I'm from the city of Pittsburgh, where my father was chair of philosophy of education at the University of Pittsburgh. My mother, a community college teacher. Although had a very privileged status as the son of the chair of philosophy and a war hero who led a Peace Corps movement, I didn't have much of an upbringing. My father abandoned me. Pittsburgh tortured me, sold me into slavery. When I came to Seattle, supposedly for protection from abuse, they lay in wait to torture me again and justify a hideous crime that took place on Mount Desert Island in the 80s. Navos, a psychological syndicate of hardcore felonious psychiatrists, locked me up and refused to allow me to go to school. When I escaped, I had finally learned sign language as a deaf man. I rose to the top of my class in Pennsylvania, made the honor society, graduated from college. And Navas and Seattle, city of Seattle, have never admitted to themselves or others to whom they are very dangerous that this is the fact of the circumstances because they all secretly poisoned me with something leading to Parkinson's. And it's a lot easier to hide behind the shadow of their old diagnosis. I have papers where they wrote that I imagined being kidnapped and tortured as a child. The truth is that I have letters from the people who kidnapped and tortured me and pictures that were taken of me when I was in severe dislocation and horrible trauma. It's clear that I was tortured. Well, the city of Seattle will never admit to any of this. So they have cornered me on the streets with an underclass in Tacoma who have their own politics. Since most of that is already familiar to people, I thought that I would move on towards Tacoma's underclass politics. The people who I knew at the University of Pittsburgh included a man who was second place attorney for the class of Mark Nordenberg, who went on to become chancellor of the University of Pittsburgh. He had a blurb. The University of Pittsburgh's prior chancellor before Nordenberg was Wesley Posvar, also a war veteran like my father. Posvar wrote the Federal Emergency Management Agency Constitution for Ronald Reagan. He lived in Westmoreland County with Mel Gibson's father. Miles Kirshner was the second ranked attorney, law student under Nordenberg, and he had a blurb that read, "There's no such thing as objective reality, only what the jury believes." When it comes to Seattle and Tacoma's underclass, Seattle likes to say that Tacoma is too dangerous for most of them. I think the truth is that Seattle manipulates Tacoma very shrewdly. And it's a question of what the underclass believe. They have their own politics. If you look at my politics, I was tortured, we now know, by an Attica State Prison psychiatrist with the help of Roger Waters, a psychological espionage agent from Pink Floyd and Her Majesty's Secret Service. And what Waters likes to do is just get the brain waves flowing. We know from my investigation on Mount Desert Island that AIDS was an attack, but psychologically, it's impossible for Seattle and Tacoma, underclass or upper class, aristocracy, law, administration, federal government, hospitals, schools, to entertain understanding. They have no capacity to admit evidence or facts. And I will prove this by trying once again to secure understanding on your part. And I will fail. And so you ask yourself, why, when he just explained everything so clearly, did he fail to secure understanding on my part? The reason is that you're chronically incompetent, and I'll prove it. So maybe you can get over the hurdle, as Clint Eastwood likes to say. On Mount Desert Island, there was an entrapper from the Green Party. Mount Desert Island was the scene of a book called Race and Reason. He was white, he was neo-Nazi, he was constantly extolling Joseph Goebbels. He was in a clique known as Gurdjieff Society, who were active in Vichy France, helping the Gestapo. The NAACP covered for him, saying he was working their will against the evils of China. How do you explain that? Well, the reason is because the Green Party believes it. And the Green Party, after all, has regulars from the Black Panthers and the NAACP. Oh, how interesting. So the white man who believes in Joseph Goebbels from Mount Desert Island's Race and Reason culture has formed an alliance with the Black Panthers. What's the nature of this alliance? Well, Will Zell introduced me to a Green Party individual named John Archer from the Jackson Immunogenetics Laboratory, who had built like a five-sided house with a fireman's pole down the middle in South Goldsboro, Maine. He had a dog named Doodoo Rock, which is like deep doo-doo, right? Doodoo Rock. In Doodoo Rock, he said he had to take him out to chew cow hooves. It was cow hooves therapy, or he would bite someone. So these were behavioralists. Will Zell set me up with a woman with tattoo of the Grim Reaper pointing at her vagina and needle tracks. The NAACP said, along with Miles Kirshner and Martin Edelman, that it was to take out the aggression that Leslie Katz had stoked by rubbing her vagina in my face night after night for over a year, and then leaving me unrequited. I carefully protected her virginity. Will Zellbrom was from an alliance of people who were behind 911. How do I know that? Because they were behind the AIDS attack. And there's a picture of Diamanda Gallas outside the World Trade Center holding a stiletto. She is a friend of Kim Kardashian, Yoko Ono, and Kanye West, who works with Donald Trump. So Kanye West and Clint Eastwood start the brainwaves flowing for Waters among the black underclass in Tacoma and the administrative leaders of Seattle, who come to see eye to eye about cow hooves therapy. What does this mean? What it means is that, for one thing, Zhao had a namesake at Tyler Art School when he was talking about his scheme to transform the human race by injecting the blood before AIDS happened. Zhao had a namesake for Diamanda Gullis named Dia from the band Dermond Circle. Dia called me the night they claimed John Lennon died, and yet these people are all friends with Yoko Ono, which means that there's evidence that John Lennon pulled a Houdini that has nothing to do with schizophrenia, that it was a fourth dimensional racket tracing back to the age of Vichy France and the great dictators when Disney was making Hitler cartoons of Donald Duck. So they put together a little guerrilla theater operation. When I was living with a man who either is or was the namesake or the actual director of Obama's army operations, a white Catholic. Now, you have a white Catholics and neo-Nazis working together with the Black Panther Party and claiming that they're avenging racial insults. Wow, how interesting. Let's look at one of their cow hoof therapies. A man named Donahue, who is a parochial extremist, and he talks about injecting people. On the reverse side of my father's obituary, where there's a legend of the German Green Party as well. My father became sick and died. So what that means is that when the Ku Klux Klan forms an alliance with the Black Panthers, they need a common enemy. They need cow hooves so they don't bite each other. So what do? They turn on a white liberal whose philosophy of education was advantage Black people because they have been disadvantaged for too long. You heard that correctly. My father was a liberal who wanted to open schools to Black people. He refused the presidency of the University of Georgia because they refused to desegregate. He said that was his condition. He would be the president of the University of Georgia if they desegregated. Now, Black people in the underclass have what they believe. There's no such thing as objective reality, only what the jury believes, Miles Kirshner likes to say. So they turn on a white person as cow hooves therapy. And who laughs? Will Zell, Joseph Goebbels, Donald Trump pat them on the head because everybody's expendable to these types. So that's the situation that we see in trying to reason with them. It's what Bobby Werner called an exercise in futility. He was an apt individual. When I told him about listening to J.G. Bennett, one of the acolytes of Ouspensky, the fourth dimensional occult psychologist, from the age when Gurdjieff was in Vichy, France, working with the Gestapo, obviously, from all of the evidence. That's the only impression that I can get derived from his activities. J.G. Bennett said, the universe has a requirement of man that's analogous to man's requirement of cattle for their meat and their leather. These mutterings of a psychotic got out from one of his darling angels, Robert Fripp of King Crimson. And I told Bobby Werner about this. He says, that sounds like a very Russian idea. Gurdjieff knew Stalin and was a Mason in Russia. He was arrested for Masonry, in fact, at one point under the Soviets. So what exactly has happened? Well, one of the ringleaders of this movement, Amanda Harcourt, is an attorney for Hair and Yoko Ono and worked with Penis Gabriel and Penis J. Sinfield of King Crimson, and Tamo De Jong of the Grangan Society, building their little idea of an arc for the British Empire while they planned to get rid of our grannies with a geopolitical Pink Floyd movement called Geo Floyd and Black Lives Matter. Kick out our grannies while convincing the underclass that there's a race struggle going on, when in reality, these people work together, basically thinning the ranks. And of course, they have spinner beanies at Spike Oldby headquarters with Cornell West and Columbia saying, and China's evil, milk! China's evil, milk! Duvall said, which apparently is the name of the county Trump lives in, he's a black man at CCAC, he said, I believe that Bush started AIDS. I know Bush started AIDS, is what he said. And I support him for it. Well, Amanda Harcourt wrote to me in 1984 and said the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's very interesting. What exactly does that mean? Well, it means drink the Kool-Aid, queer bait. That's what they used to say as a snide remark about Jonestown, Jim Jones. They made a game of Russian roulette, um, a game of chicken with the help of Everett Koop, all the chickens in the coop, and the Zappas. They played chicken with the AIDS epidemic. And they had a script that said things like, take away my eyes. Sometimes I'd rather be blind. These sadists were from the Jewish Holocaust survivor community. The psychiatrist from Attica State Prison, Bernard Wattenmaker, taught me about Yad Vashem when I was about 9 years old, and then hired a gang to kidnap and gas me in a place called King's Estate. This isn't propaganda. The highest ranking member of the National Security Council, longtime Central Intelligence Agency agent from the Society for Human Ecology, Mount Desert Island, John Stockwell, cased me in Allentown when I was staying with Walter Hodarewski, who was with Will Zellbrome at Northern Forest, but who I met at Claymont School at the invitation of Robert Fripp of King Crimson. He cased me, and it was my birthday when he cased me. So the whole is greater than the sum of its parts meant they were going to spook the horses to the burning barns. You know what that means? When horses are scared, they struggle to break free and they run back into the barn and are burned to death. This happened in my neighborhood, very nearby this crowd that I lived and grew up among. Well, what happens when you have information? To this day, Seattle refuses to protect the public and the society with information. Refuses. They won't do it. They want to have a licky chops, Las Vegas Wheel of Fortune mentality about it coming from Hollywood, from the administration who pulled this stuff, who see it as a lottery, who poison a society with the Beatles music. Beatles were full of toxic emissions. Nobody listens to them as any sense. Well, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Meant drink the Kool-Aid. If people had information, they would have said, hold up, there's toxics being circulated among us that are contagious. We need to hold off and social distance. Social distance, does that sound familiar? Until this is we're tested and can get this under control. The opposite happened. Everybody blew on the flames. They came up with stupid puns like Stonewall. And then they all said, drink the Kool-Aid, queer wall. And this is a psychotic influence of people who should have been questioned. The psychiatrist from Attica State Prison formed an alliance with Roger Waters, a scary, scary fascist from neo-Nazi Britain, to poach a child as a symbol of cow hoofs therapy for the politics of the black underclass. It's deranged thinking to support people who are psychiatrists from Attica State Prison in the Holocaust survivor community playing a game of play it again, Sam. We can do it better. There were the minstrels in Sobibor who would greet what Goebbels called the merchandise and lead them to a ramp they called the Himmelschweg, which meant the path to heaven, which was, of course, to the gas chambers. And that's what they meant when they gassed me at King's Estate. They were referring to King's heavenly estate. What in the world did the NAACP think that they are doing in supporting this neo-Nazi craziness? They're angling for innocent people just because they're there. And who do you think's laughing? They're honorary the African warriors like Wilson Brum and Joseph Goebbels. Honorary the sacred, the honorary the African elders or something, because of the spirit foundation of John Lennon. It's not schizophrenic, it's tactical. And they really thought this stuff out. I'm not joking when I say in 1984, the Zappa's administration wrote to me, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. While I was at Falk Medical Library under the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Now, I've offered you a chance to understand, and you didn't. I know you didn't. You don't have to think, why didn't I? Because I already know why you didn't. You're psychologically incompetent, is why you didn't.